How do you reach people with other views and still educate them without alienating? That's what we will discuss today. Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. The other guy is my co-host and father, Brandon. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. While you are at it, check out our other social media at the handles below. For those returning, thank you for always coming back. And now on to today's topic of AgVocating. First, what is AgVocating? Well, you'll often see people on social media, they will claim or they will portray themselves as an AgVocate. What is that? It's an advocate for agriculture. Typically, those people are focused towards farming rather than ranching, but I think it definitely involves a lot of things that come with ranching as well. The big problem is, and we'll talk about that today, is that people that are these influencers often portray, much like last week, we're talking about perception and reality. They will portray a certain thing that they may not know all about, or they just may not get their point across very well. And what they end up doing oftentimes is they alienate the very people they are trying to win over and explain things to. So with that, I'll kind of leave that as the pitch and see what Dad's initial comments are, where he sees that in relation to us and what we do here on the Hashknife Ranch YouTube channel.
That's a multifaceted subject, really. Everybody who has an opinion, and we all do, that opinion's based on whatever your experiences are, whatever your influencers to you have been. And so to change that, you almost need some personal experience in that to really get somebody to change their mind. And you know, since the internet and emailing, and I noticed this when I worked in that former life in a corporate world, is that people would write emails and in a way that you would never talk to somebody, you know, the way you write an email. I mean,
in terms like it's a little more crass and less respectful.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also they may have voice inflection, body language is all taken out of that, which
all gone.
is 75, 80, 85, 90%. You know, I've talked about that in clinics. Most of our communication is nonverbal. And so when you have only a written word, not even verbal, just a written word, that can be taken in a number of different ways by the recipient that wasn't meant necessarily, or the meaning. You can switch a couple of words and it completely changes the tone of an email. And then there are emails that are sent that are just nasty, you know, that, I mean, there's really no other way to take it. So
yeah, the
communication is a big thing on anything. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about, you said AgVocating, right? I never heard you say that. Okay. This is what happens when you get on the old Twitter, twatter, whatever stuff. So I'm learning new words. Then the whole problem with getting to change somebody's mind is having a compelling argument, right? So or relating to them in a way that you can change the way they see things. And I've been around some people, and I try to be like this, but I'm clearly not. I mean, I grew up around some very, very hardened individuals, and you just said what the hell you meant. And none of this pussyfooting around. You know, I ain't got time for your bullshit. Just tell me what you think. And it was not taken, poorly. It was, this is the way it is. This is how I think. Oh, okay. And you just, I mean, and maybe it's just a skin thickness thing that you develop. And sometimes I'm thick skinned as hell. Other times I'm like, depends on what the subject is. And of course, my family knows my big red buttons that they can just, push with a, with a feather. But I think if you try not to be that way, and you try to see the best in what somebody's communication is, that goes a long ways to that. And especially with an argument. And when I say an argument, I mean, call it debate, right?
Right.
Where you're not adversarial, you're just having a different viewpoint. And there's the old thing about describing a coffee cup where one person can see the handle and the other person can't. They're describing the same thing, but it's a different viewpoint. And they're seeing a completely different picture.
Yep.
So the skill in that communication, there's a gentleman that I met, and everybody loved this guy. I mean, one of those, just a fine individual. Name is Alan Dorhauer. Alan, you're out there. What a human. He had a way and I studied him, watched him communicating with people, where he would literally be asking them how they are. Hey, what do you think? He wouldn't tell them what we were going to do. And he was a very, very influential, but very in a spot where he was setting goals, talking about what we were going to do it and how we were going to get there. But the way he did that was asking questions. It takes more time. It takes developing relationships with people. When you ask somebody their opinion, instead of telling them what you're going to do, what does that do for you personally? It gives you instant buy-in. It's like, hey, he cares about what I'm saying. Now, the bad part of that is if you tell somebody that we value your opinion and we want to know, and then they do the opposite of what they were going to do anyway, that's disingenuous. And he was never disingenuous about anything. He was always asking you what you thought, your opinion. How does this affect you? How do you see this affecting others? And he'd have you problem solve or ask you to problem solve with him from your perspective.
Right.
And he'd say, okay. And then if he needed you to see something from someone else's perspective, that it's all about priorities, right? What is most important? And he would say, okay, what about this? And you go, oh. But his mannerisms of, okay, this is what I hear you saying, right? Okay, I got this right. You're really good about this. I mean, you were pretty plain about it. He was complimenting you the entire time, but at the same time, when he's talking to you, he's also, if you weren't listening for it, you would get schooled without him even letting you know, teaching you in an adult way. This is how I want to behave, how I like people to behave, how I want them to interact with each other. And it was a super healthy way to do it. I mean, if your idea or something was a little selfish, or it was, you weren't looking at the big picture, or you didn't know about what the big picture was, he would explain it. He goes, well, this is what we need to do. And then he'd say, what about this? And he says, I think if we try this, because of what we have going on over here, this is a higher priority for the good of everybody when you're trying to hold something together. And he would get people's buy-in on stuff that to begin with would be maybe, not 180 degrees, but certainly maybe 90 to 20 degrees away from where their focus was and what their needs were. And he's very skillful listening to him and watching him. Didn't always necessarily follow it. I mean, because those are skills that are, I don't think you're born with those skills. I think he probably learned those along the way. And again, it takes time, but you're also really developing a relationship and taking the time to do that early, where when the man walks into a room the next time and he says, hey, can we do this? You're likely to say, yeah. Right. I mean, you just, because he's a natural leader that way, but he leads you by asking for you to lead also.
Yeah. No,
if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think that's a great way of kind of explaining exactly what it should be to be an advocate, because we'll talk about it in a second here, but the alienation part, what's the opposite? It's relating to people, which is exactly what you just explained. You're getting people to understand that you either empathize or you can see from their perspective, even if you didn't think of it that previously, they brought that forward to you, and so you can then connect and you understand at least from their perspective. I listen, I am completely all about killing cattle to eat beef and doing it in a systematic way, in a way that it is not going to cause any harm to that animal in terms of safety or making it inhumane or anything like that. I want that to
Stress.
be a quick,
Yeah.
clean kill so that they don't
Right.
even feel it, right? But
Humane.
right.
Yeah.
But there's other sides of the coin that would say the way in which cattle are produced for beef, it's inhumane because they are in pens constantly and they're not taken care of. And I think that's where the relation comes in and we go, okay, I see what you're saying. I see where you're getting maybe some of these misconceptions, but I also recognize that there are bad apples out there who have created a dialogue for you by showing you the worst possible outcomes for these animals, and that is not the majority of what happens. That is less than the 1% of what actually occurs in reality. And that's where we come into relating, saying, I understand where you're coming from, I see where you get this idea, but that is not the case because of A through Z. You explain all
Well,
that.
yeah. And is there a word that's the opposite of advocate?
I don't know.
That is their goal is to
Destroy.
discredit and
Right.
destroy. And so no matter what you say or what you do is going to not follow that narrative, right? So
And hold on
with
to that
misinformation.
comment. Hold on to that comment because yeah, we will discuss that later because we did have
Okay.
a commenter on the channel recently say some stuff, and I'll comment part. I'll quote part of that, and we'll
Okay.
explain what you're about to go down. But
Okay.
hold on to that. Uh,
Yeah, I will. Well,
Sticking
let,
with
let
it.
me let me let me say this though, with in regards to what Alan would do. He wasn't only trying to get your buy-in, he was genuinely looking for reasons why they maybe should alter what they're going to do too.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the
I mean,
logical explanation as to why you need to make the fix or
and that
addition?
and that's also the problem with someone who's got an idea, is that and they've got the ability to implement that idea or their argument, whatever it may be, that no matter what, I'm right and this is what
Right.
we're going to do. And that's the problem, I think, a lot of times with debate, and like you're talking about, or advocating, is that not everything that you do or say applies everywhere else. So
Right.
it isn't like it's a science that's cut and dried and that, you throw a ball in the air, it's coming down. It might
Right.
come down over there. Wind may be blowing. I mean, there's all kinds of different factors that will influence what you do, but getting people to see that, and I guess my original comment was about how we communicate and the means in which we communicate, and doing it over a keyboard or typing is the worst porous way in the world to communicate, I think,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to influence somebody in the right way, or you have something to do or something to a common goal but different ways to get there. I mean, it causes nothing but dissension. I mean, and I'm as guilty of that as myself. I mean, I remember one night getting an email from uh, a coworker, did the same basic job I did, and it was like it was accusatory, and it didn't have all the facts. And I spent night shift. I spent 2.5, 3 hours. I mean, I was banging out this email and explaining why his hair color was wrong. I mean, I was going down the same road, and it was exhausting. And at the end of it, I'm ready to look at it, and I went, you know what? Okay, I read it again. I read it again, and I went, what's the purpose that this is going to serve?
Mhm. Other than to check your ego.
Check your ego.
Yeah.
And I went, you know what? I just erased it and talked to him face to face and said, hey, maybe you might not have known this, but this is what happened. He goes, oh, I wish I'd have known that. That is the value of face to face, or, not being accusatory from either side.
Right.
Say, hey, you might not have known this. And and one thing that what Alan would also do, I'd seen him do this before, is he would say, I've done this, or I would have thought the same thing in your shoes, but this is. So he validated that what you said was important and probably right from the perspective at the time, but
Right.
then anybody can make this mistake, and this is what you probably didn't know. And they're like, oh yeah, kind of made me look like a fool myself. So, I mean, those are skills that are not done and cannot be done, I don't think, over the written word.
Right. Well,
especially with a warrior,
and that's why we continue to do like social media like this, because we have more long-term dialogue. Yeah, people can cut and snip and they can pull our words and they can probably make us sound like
for sure
idiots and absolutely
I've done stuff
horrendous
with
people.
the press that way,
right?
In former jobs where, I mean, you'd have a reporter go with you for 3-4 hours, spend time with you, and they would take the 20 seconds that made you sound and look the stupidest and put it out of context, and like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Both on television and a news thing and the written word. So again, they had an angle.
Yeah. Well, and here's where I'll continue with the alienation piece, because we are trying to use this channel as a way to be advocates for agriculture, specifically ranching, and specifically ranching in Montana, because I'll tell you
what we know.
There is a influencer in Wyoming, and you can go look them up. It is Our Wyoming Life. They do a great job of showing a lot of what we call our educational segments that are 20 minutes long. They do all sorts of segments in terms of length with what they do on a daily basis. They don't necessarily sit down and have a dialogue like we do on a regular basis. This is more of like a podcast setting, as a lot of people like to say. But we do kind of dabble in what they've done. They do a great job of showing what the, oftentimes everyday stuff is. And they've got other things too, and they've got a huge following. We are just one of many faces. We represent us, but hopefully we can kind of show others what a lot of ranchers do as well. But to keep on the alienation portion, I had a Twitter friend who also pointed out that AgVocates tend to cause an opposite reaction when they attempt to actually achieve something else, which is what we've been discussing. That Twitter friend and I had a short dialogue, and from that we discussed how you cannot alienate your following and claim to educate them at the same time, right? And this is precisely why we preach about with those who come to our state, that the same philosophy in terms of you can't come in thinking that you want to be part of something, but then completely push the other side away. And that's why we get so freaking irritated with it. Yeah. So don't alienate the people you're trying to bring onto your side, is really the moral of the story. We have to connect with people, which is what we're doing here. We try to do here, not push them away. And we continue to explain the beef situation to gain followers, show our lifestyle, share our heritage, and all that stuff on this channel and the other social media. It's not a way of saying, you're wrong, you need to fix yourself. It's, hey, look at it from our perspective. What is going on? This is why we see things this particular way. Please just empathize with us a little bit so that we can have that discussion back and forth. We are kind of putting ourselves out there, so we're asking that everybody else kind of take maybe a step forward. And thankfully, as we've gotten more and more followers, we're getting more people commenting, and I'm able to dialogue with them back and forth. And when I don't have a really good answer, I'll send it to Dad and say, hey, make an answer, and he'll make it. I'll copy and I'll paste it onto the YouTube channel. So not always is it me commenting, but the majority of the times it is.
Brilliant stuff is me.
Yeah.
Poignant, I think, is a good word. Yeah.
What would you say to that? Like just kind of that part that I was talking about, you can't alienate the very people you're trying to
that's right.
Keep on your side.
Why would you? You have to think about a person that you're trying to influence as a customer in a way.
Yeah.
Because you want them to buy your understanding and your lifestyle in a way that is
intellectual customer. That's probably the best.
That's yes. That's what. Yeah. No. Yeah. You're not selling them anything other than, hey, this is the way we'd like you to understand or see it from this point of view. Yeah. But if you're selling a car, would you be abrasive with someone who's standing there in front of you and they're a potential customer? Your product is, like you say, the intellectual but the product of the car is tangible, you know, you're not gonna intentionally make them mad.
Right.
You may, I mean, you say something stupid as a salesman, and I've had them do it, like try to BS me, you know, like, no, that's not how that works. So, you treat them how you'd want to be treated in the same, situation, but then also treat them like they're a customer, like you have something to sell them, and you do, it's an idea.
Right.
So you're going to temper your words a little bit, but there are those that they're not looking to influence you, they're looking to destroy you.
Right.
So,
And that's
I mean,
still
you have
upcoming.
to, yeah, but you have to kind of sift that away from, and those folks, there's something, you're never going to do anything with those.
Right.
I don't think, um,
I've
because
made comments back. I say, I'm sorry you feel this way. We apologize if somebody has done something to make you think that we mistreat our animals, things like that. We care
right,
about our animals. And I explained, shortly, I probably spend more time really thoughtfully thinking those replies out than I do the other replies, because I want them to get, while we have a vehement disagreement in how we treat animals and how animals should be used, frankly, um, it, I'm not going to sit there and try to blatantly go back against them with the fire that they've thrown at us. I'm going to try and
right.
throw a little bit of water on the situation, which is, it's not me trying to be disingenuous. It's me trying to make sure that I ensure I do not continue to fuel the fire that they are trying to fuel themselves.
Well, and sometimes even throwing water on it is adversarial. Sometimes the best thing to do is let the fire burn itself out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good point.
Right.
Yeah.
But with your comment to, some of them are wanting to just not participate in what we do. Maybe they don't eat meat
Right.
for whatever reason, whether if it's a religious reason, that's okay. I mean, it's all their choice. That's all their choice. But don't try to stop others from doing what they want to do
Yes.
too, because of the way you think. And I think that's sometimes how that influence goes. And let's look at it this way: when you have an animal that is going to slaughter, they're going to slaughter to feed people. So that's what's going to happen. And instead of saying, we don't like killing an animal, okay, I understand that. I'm not get any joy out of it,
Right.
but at the same time, I'm not going to try to say you can't and then justify it with, well, okay, they're being killed, but they're being killed too young, or they're being killed, they're too fat, or there's always a qualifier there to justify what they just don't want to have them killed. So they attack that part of it, and maybe I'm getting too far ahead where you want to be on some of the other comments, but it's sometimes it's the justification is contrived.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to briefly talk about your issue with like the age thing, it kind of goes back to our issue last year with the Oregon bill,
Right.
about, was it Oregon? I thought it was Oregon, where they wanted them to you could only you could only butcher the animal once it had naturally died. Well, by that time, not only is the meat really not that good, but that animal's probably suffered in the terms that it took to die naturally, because
Well,
it
but what they're not saying is that's exactly right. They're not saying, hey, this animal is going to be unusable.
right.
So they're trying to shut it down entirely.
Yeah.
That's only part of their argument. And so what you sometimes don't say is more important than what you say.
Yes. Now, another issue, and other than just alienating themselves from the people who they're trying to portray their information from, but some advocates also steal information, and this is something
Mm.
that um, I've really tried hard to make sure that we do not do. And if anybody ever has an issue with the content we create, please let us know in the comments, or something like that, or email us, because we will gladly fix and correct the situation. But some advocates steal information from others and blatantly plagiarize, alienating themselves from the rest of the agricultural community. And really what am I referencing? It's integrity. So I get ideas from all other YouTube channels. I Google like crazy. I look up news articles, but what do I do every time we do that? I always
footnote or you
reference
cite them. Yeah, exactly.
I'm always telling people where they can find them. I'm trying to put links in there.
Well, that's bringing receipts to your argument, right?
Right. But it's because we're using information to not only bolster our argument, explain our situation, or maybe provide a little bit more nuance to a circumstance. But it's also a way of, if people like what we have and what we provide, they can also find it elsewhere, because we're not sitting here trying to keyhole everything as a influencer in our sense. We are just trying to get the information out there, and maybe it'll work out in our benefit one day. It's just not doing that right now. It's mostly just us putting forth a lot of effort and a lot of work. But our ultimate goal is maybe get a little extra money, but more in a bigger goal set, get more people to understand the situation. So if things like the beef prices continue to rise, they'll look back at some of our videos and go, oh, this is the process. This is what's happening. This is why.
Right. No, one of the things you said there, stealing someone's information or not citing it, plagiarism, is kind of going opposite or backwards from what you want to do.
Yeah.
When you influence, because one of the things that is a very powerful psychological tool for someone is agreement, or hey, everybody else thinks this. Yeah, I should think this too. I mean, there's been many psychological experiments and sociological experiments on having like 3 glasses of water, and one be short and fat, one be, somewhat skinny and tall, and one medium, and you have different volumes in them. But one of the volumes is clearly got more volume to it. And they will have a group of people say that's not the one that has more in it. And someone who clearly knows, they'll look at it and they will be influenced, even though the evidence is right in front of them, and they see it for themselves. They will go along with what everybody else says, because they're thinking, I don't want to seem stupid or that I'm wrong, or I don't get this. They'll go along, and that's not. Yeah, I mean, it happens. So if you're plagiarizing and you're saying one thing, then maybe you're trying to gain a crowd or use a crowd, depending on how you're doing. You may be, just wanting to do a scorched earth, let's just burn everybody down, like you said with your fire analogy. But having the citations and the references where they can look for it themselves, I think is powerful. I think it's important. And I know when you're doing your research, I mean, you're nutty about making sure the resources or the citations that you use are credible. And that's the other part. You don't want to tie yourself to something that's not credible.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, let's go back to the top 10 horses and top 10 cattle videos real quick.
Oh yeah.
The horse ones were ridiculous because I never found an actual website, and I made that very clear. I never found a good website that said the top 10 horses in the United States or the world, but I found like blogs, right? And when I see 3 or 4 blogs that kind of say roughly the same thing, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make kind of a generic list that seems to kind of push us towards this direction. The cattle one, it was a top 10 or top 20 list, because I think somebody commented like, this is a nonsense list. You're completely off your rocker. But it was like 3 years old. It was like in 2018, I think. And so it's like, I understand where people would have those issues, but at the same time, one was a legitimate source, just a little late. The other was a combination of various sources that kind of, again, had a common theme to them. So I was like, you know what? I think we can kind of assume some risk in this regard.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, every time you've done something like that, you always make that caveat too.
Yeah.
And people don't want to hear caveats. They want to argue. They want to argue.
I don't have the time to make a bunch of journal reviews and then do them myself on YouTube. So sorry, folks.
Right. Well, how many people have you met that while you're having a debate with them, they're not listening to what you're saying? They're thinking about what they're going to say next.
Yeah. It's
and that's
very frustrating.
It goes along with that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. the final point that I want to talk about with AgVocating, and then we'll talk about the things that you've brought up a few times with the
Okay.
other side, maybe
Yeah.
maybe people like PETA, vegans, things like that. But for advocates, my final point with that is that some of them simply claim to know information when they truly do not. They portray themselves as having resident or valuable knowledge when they really have no idea what they continue to share on social media. They claim to be, a farmer or something like that, and they've never turned dirt a day in their life. So my thing is to a lot of the people maybe watching this and they follow us, please be careful of these people and approach with a critical thinking stance. And so for us, we reference a lot of things with farming because we are in the agricultural industry, but neither of us will ever say we are farmers. We know exactly what's going on and things like that. You want to talk about sheep? Okay, we might be able to talk a little bit about it, but we don't do sheep, so we can't really say anything with true integrity about sheep. You want to talk cattle and specifically red Angus cattle and maybe some gated horses? We're all about it. That's us. We can do that. But just because we don't farm doesn't mean we can't also incorporate some of that stuff into our conversation. So people just need to understand, if this person's never really been outside of their house and they've done a lot of farming on their phone or farming on their YouTube, like just be careful.
Well, yeah, and I think that may be a over time a mechanism for somebody to discredit themselves, but again, I don't think they're looking for the credibility of Google,
Right.
or what's the other one that's a
Well,
Wikipedia,
yeah, and I think that
but
you're talking about credibility. It's also, I think, where a lot of this stems from the plagiarism and then
right,
the not being a resident expert, like what I've just explained. I
right,
think that comes from people they're chasing likes, they're chasing follows, they're chasing
right.
subscriptions, they're chasing those things that they get more and more popularity. And it's really what it's become is the real world life is now high school. People want to get those likes because
True.
am I wrong?
There's a reward for it,
Yeah,
whether popularity or money,
right.
right? Monetization. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. But there are people that is their niche, where, oh, I'll just say the opposite, or create drama, create something that I don't really have any expertise in, but I get followers.
Right.
I mean, it's ingenuous and it's insidious, but um, it's real. I mean, that's what people, some do. I don't think the vast majority, but I think some of these folks are, um, looking for controversy, trying to create it.
Yeah. Well, and
Wonder what
I
they're
mean,
like in their real life.
yeah. I mean, you're talking about controversy, but that what gets people all excited to watch TV every 4 years? It's an election because there's
Right,
controversy between two people screaming at each other on a platform that's
right.
shown on two or three different stations. I think the fact that there is controversy, it gets people to, it's much like boxing or MMA. People want to pick a fighter and they want to,
Sure,
it starts becoming wagering, whether it's with
it's a team.
ideals or, yeah. But I think that's where that maybe comes from. And because of that, people then get the follows, they get the likes, and they can, because they're not knowledgeable or an expert in what they're actually portraying, they can also misinform people. And that's the dangerous part too, because then those people who we'll talk about shortly who are fighting against us are then, they're taking this information. Well, look at what this person did, look at what they do, look at what they've said, and they take that and they throw it back onto our faces and onto our plates, and it makes it that much more difficult for those of us who do good and try to do everything right by animals and by the ground which we work.
Well,
It just makes it that much difficult.
there's nothing like countering an argument by taking it out of context too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so there's always that, and sometimes you'll, even ourselves, I mean, we'll think something, but it's not really in quite the right context. We try to correct that. Say,
Right.
oh, you know what, this is in this case, So again, trying to be, as forthcoming as possible and stuff like that. But there are some folks that's what they do, is they do that on purpose without giving full context.
Right. Okay. Now the moment Dad's been waiting for. The other side. So we have had people attack the way we do things and the way we operate. They've also insinuated and sometimes blatantly stated how we cruelly treat animals and we do not care for our livestock. We have made multiple videos explaining this and discussing this very topic. And for example, I will do a reference to one video specifically. It's one of our first videos that really kind of took off and it started getting us subscribers from the beginning, which was the horse branding video. I've talked about this multiple times. We do it with a fire brand because it's easier to see in terms of they look like woolly mammoths in the winter.
Hot iron, yeah.
Because they're trying to stay warm, man. So when you use a hot iron, it disrupts the hair and the skin enough that you can still see that with their hair. A freeze brand does not necessarily always do that, and sometimes it's a little difficult to see through snow also, because guess what, snow's white. So
well,
it's just
white and a light colored horse, white,
right,
gray, yeah.
Yes, and so with those reasons and some others, that's why we continue to use the hot iron. That video though continues to get views. We continue to get people commenting on it, saying how cruel we are, not only because of the iron, but then also because what we did was we took 3 horses, and one horse was filmed from afar, another was filmed slightly closer, and a third was filmed right over the shoulder of the person branding. So
for different perspectives.
So you got to see 3 different perspectives on 3 different horses that are all the same color. So people thought that we took this poor horse and we burned him 3 separate times on the same spot over and over to get this video. That was very irritating because that is not at all how I try to portray it and talk about taking things out of context.
Well, but here's the thing, that again, they're taking that out of context because if you looked, when we applied the iron, there was no iron previously laid on that horse. There was no brand. Otherwise, again, what I think they're doing is they're probably, in order to gain a crowd, sharing that with all of their buddies and explaining how horrible this is. And so they want to make comment, and they'll get on there and make comment too, when they have absolutely no factual basis for it.
Yeah.
And don't think. There's no critical thinking going on there.
Right. Now, that was one video. Now, here's the other one. A recent visitor on YouTube commented on how cruel a common care practice is, and it's not really that common, but it can be, and how they looked forward to seeing the livestock industry come to an end. Their quoted comment, not the whole thing, but this is part of it. It said, in quotes, "The day cannot come soon enough for animal agriculture to be outlawed," end quote. Now, I'm not here to call them out or to cause an uproar like we've been discussing. We're not trying to alienate people. We're trying to explain where we think the logic is flawed. But this is for a discussion purpose, which is why we started this channel from the start. So this video was the one that was aired about a year ago, and it was when Dad had to graft a calf skin onto another to save the second calf. This, again, it's not necessarily common in terms of we go out and we skin calves constantly. Oh my God, the things that would happen with that. But what occurred was it was a last ditch effort to save that second calf, the one that was alive, and it ended up working. Guess what? It worked. It was wonderful.
It's an old practice.
And does it work all the time? No, but again, it's a last ditch effort, and this one particularly worked. This guy goes in, guy or girl, I don't know. As a background, I looked at the channel just briefly. It was an anti-agriculture vegan channel from what I could see, and so that's where this is coming from. But it's very frustrating that people make comments like that because they think that we are there to torture and hurt animals. And in case, if you look at the video and you actually take any semblance of critical thinking to it, you realize we saved a life,
right?
Didn't take one, and we were using the tragedy of a first to hopefully save the second. And
Of
it
which
happened
I tried everything I could to keep that animal alive.
Right. So it's just, that's
Even a
where,
vet couldn't save that one.
right. And that's where the things get frustrating, because this is the other side. These are the people who think that we are cruel, when I really wish they would come out of their huts for just a second and maybe come join us for a couple of days and see the things, the love, the care, and the true devotion we have to the animals. We are not there to hurt them. We are not there to harm them. In fact, we constantly doctor them and have to deal with their stupidities. And so
normally we don't do that much doctoring because we don't run them hard.
But the point is, we doctor them in terms of, when they have an injury, we take care of it. We're not sitting here trying to whip them or beat them or burn them or skin them alive. We don't do any of that stuff.
If we did that, do you think they would come to us when we drive out into a pasture?
I mean, like ears?
Like all of them. I mean, yeah, she's as bad. Her and number 66, Big Rhonda.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they come to you. So there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you can't win an argument that is based on a false premise.
Right.
You know, it's the old political thing of, so candidate, do you still beat your grandmother? Implying that if you don't, that you once did.
Right.
And that if you answer yes, then you beat your grandmother. Sometimes there's, you know, it's premised in a way that, you know, you're not gonna win, but it doesn't mean you've actually done that either.
Right.
And that's the point. That's the problem with taking things out of context, or, you know, grabbing something to use for your cited material that is absolutely the opposite of what has gone on.
Yeah. Well, and to your point,
hey, look, we knew we were going to have some people do this when we started doing this. Hey, this is going to be, absolutely, people are going to do that. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, and it's frustrating, and it goes to your own, not just credibility, but to the way you are as a human. And it's you almost take it as a personal attack, and I don't think it probably is necessarily, but it's certainly an attack on what you do, which is who you are in this business.
But to your point earlier, I think here's really the fundamental issue that I personally have with a lot of the people that go about doing this, right? And again, it's going back to the point you made earlier, which is, you can have your opinions all day long and we can disagree, and that's fine, but don't try to force your opinions and your ideas onto me. We are not out there harming things, whether you actually think so or not. We're not harming animals and trying to cause their life to be absolute misery. Trust me, if those cows were miserable, you'd know about it. They freaking love their life. So do the horses. And when individuals like this either create fallacy, or they try to exaggerate what's actually going on and then force their way of life in terms of how they think things should be, where, like this guy wanted to say, animal agriculture needs to be outlawed. Like, no, it doesn't, man. Like, how are you going to feed the rest of the world? You really think the rest of the world is going to just not eat meat? And to say, well, and I was going to say the other point too is, if you say, okay, well, you just can't eat like red meat. Okay, well, what about fish? You know, some of the most inhumane ways of gathering food is through fishing. Look at the netting and the way they go about doing that. And those fish, a lot of the times, they just like suffocate to death. Like, come on.
Well, how about fish farms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want to talk about agricultural
those are
farming.
contained.
Yeah.
How about the other white meat? You know, the chicken industry has been under attack for years. Yeah. Hog industry, you know, the other white meat. So,
and that's not and here's the other thing. I'm not trying to attack other industries either.
No,
I'm just saying
no.
There's other problems elsewhere that you're going down the wrong river here.
Well, yeah, but I guess my point is that they'll attack them all.
Yeah.
You know, and so when that happens, and you are trying to force your viewpoint or your opinion, maybe you're not quite the influencer you thought if you're trying to force it, right?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you're talking about, getting buy-in. You know, if you're constantly going, you know, head to head against stuff, are you really getting buy-in, or are you just trying to force your ideas onto others.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, sometimes some of these people have, that is their, not just their entertainment, but I think it's also their virtuous lifestyle.
Mm.
And that is, I don't eat meat, I hate oil, while they're wearing, you know, a lot of stuff or using a lot of stuff that's made out of oil. You know,
Yeah.
so
Well, I mean,
they're
for
hypocritical,
another thing
and
too,
none of
though,
us can
like
get away with that.
a lot of people might think, well, you know, I'm against the beef industry. Okay, that's fine. I get it. But will you eat other meat? Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not vegan. I just
Right.
I don't like the beef industry, so I don't support it. Okay, I got it. Um, do you like Jello? Do you like glue? Do you like, you know, some of these other medicines? Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, those are all byproducts of beef, right? What? You know, and like when you start opening people's eyes to that, you're like, oh, you know, maybe an industry in which you're completely against has a lot of good outcomes from it, where you're just focusing on one small thing, you know. I don't
It
know.
makes me wonder, some of these folks, if they have a dog or a cat, and if they live in a city that, you know, I'm sure that's difficult to do that, and
Yeah,
probably no, but I don't know that.
yeah,
But how about a goldfish?
yeah, yeah,
You know, I mean, do they really live the lifestyle? Do they really go without the things that they say you shouldn't have?
yeah. That's a good point.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some
So
do. I'm sure there's some that are, I mean, absolutely living that lifestyle, and probably fairly miserable doing it. I don't know. Maybe they do love the suffering, but a lot of really good things for us come from animals.
right,
That's
absolutely.
what we do.
Um, I'm that's all my comments for today, believe it or not. But I think it's important to understand advocates. I would like to say that we are, but there's also such a negative connotation with that that I kind of like I've started stiff arming that. But we
Yeah.
do try to portray the best things possible that we can about agriculture and ranching specifically. Again, we've set up this channel. We have our social media on ways to try and reach out to people. If you saw back in mid-March, Dad did his annual calving meeting, so we try to throw some humor in there. I think this is the third year in a row that he's done
Probably.
that. So
Yeah.
telling the girls, you know, hey, have a good calving season, but do it only when it's comfortable for us,
That's
obviously.
right.
But you know, it's just some of those things to hopefully people find it funny, they can relate, and they go, hey, these aren't bad people. But other people who are influencers, you know, just be careful because they plagiarize, they alienate themselves from the rest of the agriculture community. Sometimes they claim to know things when they just don't actually do that. And then of course, like I said before, and what we just finished talking about, there are people that don't like the things we do, and we understand that. But we're not here to try and cause problems. We're not here to show you how bad we as ranchers are. We are here to try and show what we do, share what we do, and hopefully you can kind of empathize with what we do as well, so that someday we can come to the table and maybe you can have your salad and we can have our steak and we can have a civil discussion about why we think things the way we do.
Yeah. No, what is it? Tolerance?
Tolerance, yeah.
Hmm. I don't know. Well, it's it's something that we've dealt with since when I was a little kid. These same things were going on where there were people who didn't like, and the media has changed, or the way it's been done has changed. It moves much faster now than it used to.
Yeah.
You know, this is now it's light speed. Wherever somebody wants to make a comment for wherever they're at, it can be done. Where before it was someone would write an article and have
Right.
a cause, you know, and it would maybe be in a magazine somewhere, or a newspaper would pick it up. I mean, things moved very, very slowly, and we thought these people were nuts because they, to us, they didn't have any basis in reality about what was going on. Now, they may have seen something somewhere, like you said, a bad actor somewhere who did something, or they heard about it, and whether that was true or not. But all of a sudden, hey, this is my chance to um, be a leader in something that I care about.
Right.
So I don't know. It's interesting. It's a different dynamic, but if it wasn't agriculture,
Be something
they'd
like
find something else. Yeah. I mean, oil's another one. God knows what the other one, who else, using too much sunshine. Don't do that. There's only so much to go around.
that's true.
So, I mean, they're going to find something because that's kind of the personality. They have to have something to fight about or have something to have controversy in their life. I mean, there are people like that. So I know some, some. So that's the way it is. Not much you can do about them other than defend yourself and try to put out some information that's real, and you've got some dignity while you do it and honesty behind it. So, and I guess with that, you could come and work with us, teach, and we can teach you all about it from our perspective. And the pay you would get, just like you get now, a thank you till you're better paid.